Commander ZH Kral of the Viridian Collective stood before the holographic display, his three eyes narrowing as he reviewed the intelligence reports. The data streams flickered with information about a peculiar species from the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star, humans. They are primitives, his tactical officer hissed, mandibles clicking with amusement. Their fastest vessels barely achieve 0.3 lightspeed. Their weapons are chemical and kinetic. They have not even mastered quantum entanglement communication. ZH Kral gestured dismissively at the floating data. Then we proceed with the harvest operation. Their world is rich in heavy metals and rare elements. The collective requires these resources. What the Viridian Collective failed to understand was that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology, it was spite. The harvest began on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. Massive Viridian extraction vessels descended through the atmosphere, their gravitational drives creating localized earthquakes as they positioned themselves over mineral-rich regions. Tractor beams carved into the planet's crust, extracting megatons of resources with brutal efficiency. Dr. Sarah Chen watched from the International Space Station as entire mountain ranges disappeared into the alien ships. She keyed her communication array to the emergency frequency, her hands shaking with barely controlled rage. This is Dr. Chen to all resistance cells. They think we're helpless. They're wrong. Activate Protocol Odysseus. Protocol Odysseus wasn't a weapon. It was something far more dangerous, it was a promise. The Viridian Collective had conquered 47 star systems. They had assimilated species with natural plasma generation, beings that could survive in hard vacuum, and civilizations that had achieved technological singularity. They operated with cold efficiency, following mathematical models that predicted resistance, calculated acceptable losses, and optimized resource extraction. They had never encountered a species that simply refused to accept the math. Captain Marcus Webb piloted his modified mining vessel toward the nearest Viridian harvester, his cargo hold filled with stripped-down nuclear reactors jury-rigged into a cascade bomb. The Viridian shields could deflect any human weapon, but they didn't account for someone who would manually pilot a ship through their defensive perimeter and detonate themselves at point-blank range. The explosion vaporized Webb's ship and created a temporary hole in the harvester's shields. It wasn't much. It lasted exactly 2.3 seconds. It was enough. 17 other pilots, following Webb's lead, exploited that brief window. Their ships, loaded with experimental magnetic accelerator rounds, punched through the compromised shields. The damage was negligible by collective standards, roughly 2% efficiency loss across that harvester's systems. But now the Viridians knew humans would throw themselves at impossible odds without hesitation. ZH Kral reviewed the incident reports with growing unease. The statistical models indicated they would negotiate or surrender once they understood the technological disparity. Instead, they sacrificed themselves for negligible strategic gain. This is irrational. His science officer's chromatophores rippled with uncertainty. Commander, we're detecting unusual quantum signatures across their communication networks. They're attempting something with their primitive computer systems. What humanity lacked in advanced technology, they compensated for with sheer, bloody-minded creativity. While the Viridians harvested their planet, every programmer, every hacker, every basement-dwelling computer enthusiast worked on a single project, understanding Viridian software architecture. The collective systems were quantum-based, operating on principles that human scientists were only beginning to grasp. But humans had something the Viridians didn't: centuries of experience breaking into systems they weren't supposed to access, just because they could. Dr. Yuki Tanaka led the cyber warfare division from a bunker in what used to be Tokyo. Her team had reverse-engineered Viridian communication protocols from captured drones. They couldn't match the aliens' processing power, but they didn't need to. They just needed to be annoying. The first indication ZH Kral had that something was wrong came when his ship's navigation system began displaying human names. Crude images with text in various Earth languages flooded his tactical displays. His crew scrambled to purge the systems, but for every intrusion they removed, 17 more appeared. It was a distraction. A successful one. While Viridian technicians fought against the digital equivalent of a denial-of-service attack, human resistance forces launched coordinated strikes against resource convoys. They used ambush tactics, hit-and-run operations, and guerrilla warfare refined over millennia of human conflict. They destroyed empty supply vessels, sabotaged automated mining equipment, and turned every Viridian victory into a Pyrrhic achievement. The collective's efficiency ratings dropped. First by 1%. Then 5. Then 12. ZH Kral received the order from High Command with a sense of grim satisfaction. Terminate the harvest. Destroy the human homeworld. Make an example of this species. But humanity had anticipated this response. Of course they had. When the Viridian battleships moved into position for orbital bombardment, they found Earth's orbit crowded with debris, satellites, spent rocket stages, and what appeared to be thousands of small objects on collision courses. Kinetic kill vehicles, ZH Kral's tactical officer reported. Primitive but numerous. They've turned their orbital junk into weapons. The bombardment was delayed by 47 minutes as point defense systems cleared safe firing lanes. 47 minutes during which human engineers completed a project they'd been working on since the invasion began. Dr. Chen's team had stripped every fusion reactor on the planet, every nuclear warhead, every power source they could cannibalize, and built something unprecedented, a directed gravitational pulse weapon. It violated half a dozen laws of physics as humans understood them. It would probably only fire once before destroying itself. They fired it anyway. The gravitational wave hit ZH Kral's flagship like a tsunami. Systems failed. Containment fields collapsed. The ship didn't explode, it simply ceased to be structurally coherent, torn apart by its own mass. The remaining Viridian vessels retreated. The harvest operation was officially declared cost prohibitive by the collective's high command. 40,000 Viridian personnel lost for less than 1/4 of the projected resource yield. The mathematical models were revised. A warning was entered into the collective's database, flagged in the primary diplomatic protocols, species designation, human. Technological level, primitive. Threat assessment, extreme. Recommendation, do not engage under any circumstances. Note, they do not calculate odds. They do not accept defeat. They do not forgive. In the ruins of what used to be Shanghai, Dr. Chen stood among her exhausted team. They had won, though one was perhaps too strong a word. Their planet was scarred, millions were dead, and recovery would take generations. But they had made the universe understand something important: humans didn't need to be the strongest or the smartest. They just needed to ensure that crossing them cost more than it was worth. They were warned, Chen said quietly, watching the last Viridian ship disappear into faster-than-light transit. Everyone who comes after will be warned too. Humanity had earned its place in the galaxy not through diplomacy or technological achievement, but through sheer, uncompromising refusal to be victims. The Viridians learned what countless human enemies had learned throughout history: you don't need to destroy humanity to defeat them. You just need to make them decide you're not worth the effort. But once you cross that line, once you make them decide you are worth the effort, there truly is no escape.